My name is Riley Mercer. I'm 28 years old, and the night my life split in two, the loudest sound in our kitchen wasn't the silverware or the old ceiling fan rattling overhead. It was my mother's voice. "All you do is take what have you ever given us?" she shouted, slamming her palm against the table so hard the glasses jumped. I still remember the second hand of the old wall clock jerking forward behind her, as if even time itself flinched. I had just come home from a 14-hour day smelling like machine oil and cold air, and before I could sit down, she was already tearing into me for being selfish, for wasting my evenings in a workshop, for chasing what she called a hobby for lonely men with magnifying glasses. I said the one thing I'd swallowed for years. "You don't get to call my work worthless just because you never bothered to ask what I carry for this family." That only made her angrier. She stood up so fast her chair scraped like a blade across the floor. "Leave if you have any pride," she snapped. Then she added the line that burned the bridge for good. "And when you do, don't come back expecting forgiveness after your sister loses everything because of you." No one defended me. Not my sister, not my stepfather, nobody. So I stood there for one long, silent second, felt something inside me finally stop trying to be chosen, and walked to my room. I packed one duffel bag, my tool roll, my ledger, and the envelope I had never shown them. Then I left, quietly. Before I tell you what was inside that envelope and what happened exactly 2 weeks later when the first payment failed, tell me this. What time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? I want to know how far this story travels before it finds the people who need it. I didn't cry when I backed out of the driveway. That surprises people when they hear this story, because they expect some cinematic breakdown, some moment where I pulled over under a streetlight and sobbed into the steering wheel. But I'd already done my crying for that house in pieces over the years, while unclogging the utility sink after my stepfather forgot again, while staying up until 2 in the morning balancing bills no one knew I touched, while hearing my mother brag in public about sacrifice as if sacrifice had only ever worn her face. That night, all I felt was a strange, dangerous calm. The kind you feel when a clock that's been grinding itself to death suddenly stops, and the silence is terrifying only because it's honest. I drove west toward Pittsburgh with my phone face down on the passenger seat and the old leather ledger open at red lights. The ledger mattered more than the fight. It held every quiet thing I had done for them that apparently counted as nothing. Tuition transfers, grocery gaps, late electric payments, a furnace repair. The insurance deductible after my stepfather clipped the mailbox and dented the truck. The deposit I'd made every month into the account, my sister thought, somehow always worked out. I had kept records because that's what I do for a living. I restore antique clocks, and if you spend your days studying mechanisms, you learn fast that every movement has a source. Nothing turns by magic. Somebody winds it. Somebody oils it. Somebody keeps the thing alive when no one notices it's about to fail. For nearly 3 years, that somebody had been me. I'd started as an assistant in a restoration shop after a retired horologist named Arthur Vale saw me repairing my grandfather's pocket watch at a flea market. During the day, I worked freight dispatch for a warehouse outside town because it paid steady money. At night and on weekends, I cleaned gears, replaced pivots, polished brass plates, and brought dead clocks back to life in Mr. Vale's shop. My mother never called it a profession. She called it fiddling. When a museum in Pittsburgh offered me a trial position helping restore a collection of 19th century tower clocks, she laughed and told me to stop pretending tiny screws were a future. What she didn't laugh at was the money that kept appearing when bills came due. About an hour into the drive, I stopped at a gas station off the turnpike and finally looked at my phone. 9 missed calls, 12 messages, most from my mother, a few from my sister. One from an unknown number I later realized belonged to the manager of the private business college where my sister Aubrey was finishing her accounting certificate. I didn't open that one. Instead, I opened my banking app. There it was, the auto payment scheduled for 2 weeks later. Tuition. I stared at it for a long time, hearing my mother's voice again. All you do is take. What have you ever given us? Then I canceled it. Not because I wanted Aubrey punished. Not because I suddenly became cruel. I canceled it because I had exactly enough to secure a room, buy food, and survive until my first check in Pittsburgh. For years, I had been financing the illusion that our family was stable. The minute I left, the illusion would expire. I knew that. I also knew that if I kept covering everything while they insulted me, I would teach them the lesson they already believed. Riley can be humiliated and still be useful. By dawn, I had rented a narrow room above Mr. Vale's cousin's repair shop in the Lawrenceville neighborhood. The floor tilted toward the window. Pipes groaned when the radiator kicked on. The sink dripped. It was the ugliest place I'd ever loved. I set my duffel down, unrolled my tools on the small desk, and listened to the church bells from 2 streets over. No yelling, no doors slamming, no guilt waiting in the kitchen. Just the honest sound of time moving. I spent the next 10 days working until my fingertips ached. The museum job wasn't glamorous. I cataloged rusted mainsprings, photographed cracked enamel dials, and stood on scaffolding 20 feet high helping disassemble a tower mechanism that hadn't been cleaned since the 1940s. But every night I went home exhausted in a way that fed me instead of hollowing me out. Mr. Vale treated me like I belonged there. The other restorers asked my opinion. Nobody rolled their eyes when I talked about escapements or balance wheels. For the first time in years, I could feel my own future clicking into alignment. Then the first message from Aubrey arrived. It came at 11:17 p.m. while I was eating takeout noodles on the floor because I didn't own a table yet. There was no hello. Just a screenshot of her tuition portal with a red warning banner across the top. Payment failed. Under it, she wrote, "Why did tuition stop?" I stared at the message so long the noodles went cold. Another text followed before I answered. "Mom says you shut it off to punish us. Tell me she's lying. I should tell you something important here. Aubrey didn't know I had been paying her tuition in full. My mother had insisted we keep it within the household, which meant she told everyone, including Aubrey, that the money came from careful budgeting and family teamwork. In reality, I had been transferring almost half my monthly income into an account my mother controlled because she said Aubrey would feel ashamed if she knew her older sister was carrying her. Shame, in our house, was always assigned strategically. My mother never minded me feeling it. A third text came through before I could form a reply. "Mom burned the notes you left on the kitchen desk. She said if you want to act like a stranger, your things can be treated like a stranger's too." I looked at my tool roll, then at the little stack of movement diagrams and restoration sketches I had left behind in a folder by my bed. Not valuable to anyone else. Years of work to me. Something hard and cold settled in my chest. That was the moment I understood leaving wasn't going to create space. It was going to expose dependence. And dependence, when cornered, turns vicious. I typed one sentence back to Aubrey. I didn't stop caring. I stopped pretending I could be your family's invisible machine forever. She didn't answer. So let me ask the one question that sat with me all night in that crooked little room. If you were me, would you have blocked your mother right then, or kept the line open just long enough to watch the truth catch up with her? The 2 weeks after that text felt like living inside a clock someone had dropped. Everything still moved, but nothing moved cleanly. At the museum, I spent my mornings bent over a walnut long case movement from 1883, carefully cleaning blackened pivots under a jeweler's lamp, while trying not to look at the phone vibrating beside my elbow. Each notification felt like a tooth, breaking off a gear. By the end of the first month, I could tell who was messaging me by the kind of dread it caused. My mother's texts came like accusations fired from a moving car. "You made your point. happy now, or Aubrey is the one paying for your selfishness. My sisters came in bursts, angry one day, silent the next. Logan, my cousin, texted rarely, which is exactly why I paid attention when his name showed up. Riley, he wrote one Thursday afternoon, I'm not trying to guilt you, but you need to know what's happening here. I stepped out into the alley behind the workshop to call him. The March air bit through my jacket. Somewhere nearby, a delivery truck backed up with a shrill beeping that made my nerves feel even tighter. Logan didn't waste time. Your mom's in a panic. Aubrey got put on academic hold until the school receives the overdue payment and a late fee. Dean's pretending he can fix it, but he can't. He's behind on the mortgage, too. I leaned against the brick wall and shut my eyes. Behind by how much? There was a pause. Enough that notices are coming in certified mail. That part didn't shock me as much as it should have. What shocked me was how quickly the whole structure collapsed once my transfers stopped. That was the ugly math of it. Our home had never been held together by shared effort or smart planning or parental sacrifice. It had been held together by one daughter everyone underestimated. Did Aubrey know? I asked. About the tuition? Logan lowered his voice. No, I think she's just starting to figure it out. Your mom told everyone you only paid sometimes, like little bits here and there, like spare cash. I laughed once, sharp, humorless, almost ugly. Spare cash. Riley, he said carefully, I'm on your side. But your mom says you caused this on purpose. No, I said. And for the first time, the answer came out steady. I caused the pretending to stop. That night, Aubrey called. I almost didn't answer. Then I imagined her alone in that house with my mother pacing the kitchen, and I picked up. Her voice was already shaking. Were you really paying it? I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the radiator pipe while it hissed. Yes. For how long? Since your second semester? Silence. Then, in a smaller voice. Why didn't you tell me? Because our mother said you'd feel guilty. Because I was trained to help quietly and bleed neatly. Because if you knew the truth, you might have looked at me differently. And I had gotten used to being useful only when unseen. But I didn't say all that. I said, because every time I tried to talk honestly in that house, honesty got turned into drama. Aubrey inhaled sharply. Mom said you only helped with groceries once in a while. I paid your tuition, the winter heating bill, and the plumbing repair after the basement backed up, I said. I also covered the registration fee for your laptop lease, and the late fees on the electric twice. Another silence. This one longer. I could hear a television in the background and my mother's muffled voice from another room, angry even at a distance. Then Aubrey said the thing that almost undid me. She told me I had to choose between being loyal to you and staying in school. I gripped the phone tighter. What? She said if I defended you, it meant I didn't understand what family owes family. She said you left because you were too good for us. Aubrey's voice cracked. And now she keeps saying if I lose my classes, it'll be because you wanted to teach us a lesson. There are moments when pain changes shape. Mine did right there. Up until then, I had been carrying guilt, fury, grief. Heavy things, but familiar. What I felt then was cleaner than fury. It was clarity. My mother wasn't just angry I left. She was willing to weaponize my sister's future to preserve her own version of the story. Aubrey, I said slowly, listen to me. I did not leave to hurt you. I left because every good thing I did was erased the second I asked to live my own life. Those are not the same thing. She started crying, the kind of crying people try to muffle because they're ashamed of needing comfort. I don't know what to do. Mom says she may have to sell Grandma's jewelry. Dean says he's working an angle. Logan says everyone's lying. I can't focus. I'm behind in class. The financial office called me during accounting lab. I wanted to tell her I'd fix it. My whole body was built around that reflex. Fix the problem. Wire the money. Calm the room. Take the hit. But in the museum that day, I had spent 6 hours repairing damage caused by decades of neglect, And I kept thinking the same thought. You cannot restore a mechanism while it is still being forced in the wrong direction. Any help I gave without terms would not rescue us. It would reset the cycle. So I said the hardest thing I had said in years. I am not sending money into Mom's hands again. She gasped like I had slapped her. I didn't say I won't help you, I continued. I said I won't help the lie. There's a difference. Aubrey started to argue, then stopped. I could hear her breathing. I could hear my mother calling her name from down the hall. Think about this carefully, I told her. If one person leaving causes the whole house to collapse in 14 days, what does that tell you about how that house was really being run? She didn't answer, but she didn't hang up either. That night, Logan texted after midnight. Mom fainted at the kitchen counter. Paramedics came. She's okay. Doctor said stress and blood pressure. She keeps saying if Aubrey has to leave school, it'll prove you never loved us. I read the message 3 times. Then I put the phone face down and stared at the ceiling until dawn. So here's the question that gnawed at me harder than guilt ever did. Would you have said no to your own sister for one more day if you knew your mother was collapsing under the weight of a life she built on your silence? The strange thing about freedom is that it doesn't arrive as joy all at once. First, it arrives as space, then quiet, then sleep. Then one morning you realize your shoulders are no longer braced for a voice from the next room, and that's when joy begins sneaking in. By early April, the workshop had started to feel less like a refuge and more like a real life. Mr. Vale trusted me with increasingly delicate repairs. The museum curator introduced me to a preservation consultant named Naomi Bell, a sharp, funny woman who specialized in restoring public tower clocks in old civic buildings. Naomi had grease under her nails, wore boots with dresses, and never softened a sentence to make people comfortable. The first time she watched me reseat a cracked escape wheel arbor without fracturing the plate, she let out a low whistle and said, "You've been doing precision work in hiding, haven't you?" I laughed because it was too accurate. Naomi started bringing me coffee in the mornings and asking questions nobody in my family had ever thought to ask. What got you into horology? Which restoration do you still dream about? Do you prefer preserving original wear marks or returning the finish closer to factory state? Being seen that specifically after years of being reduced to the daughter who helps felt almost intimate. I didn't fall apart over it, but I felt the edges of myself coming back. A month after I arrived, Naomi invited me to assist on a high-profile project. The restoration of the clock mechanism in the old Allegheny County Courthouse Annex, a piece of machinery local reporters had started covering because the building was being reopened for a public history event. It wasn't a gallery. It wasn't a stage. It was better for me. Solid, mechanical, exact. The kind of work where your hands make a visible difference in the world. When I climbed the narrow stairs into the clock tower for the first inspection, the room smelled like dust, brass, and rain-soaked wood. Sunlight cut through the louvers and struck the great iron gears at an angle that made them look like sleeping giants. I remember touching the main wheel gently and thinking, this is what it feels like to be where your life was trying to get all along. And then Logan texted. I was standing beside Naomi, sketching the worn tooth profile on a drive gear, when my phone lit up. Mom sold the house, he wrote. Or rather, she sold what equity was left in a rush to stop foreclosure and pay part of the school debt. They moved into a rental duplex near Route 19. She tells everyone she had no choice because you abandoned them. For a second, I just stared at the words. Naomi glanced over. Bad news? I nodded once. She didn't pry. That was another thing I appreciated about her. She simply said, "Take 5," and went back to measuring the pendulum clearance. I walked to the far side of the tower room, where the bell ropes hung like thick shadows, and called Logan. She actually sold the house? Yeah, he said. Too fast, too cheap. Dean found some guy who buys distressed properties. It's done. What about Aubrey? She's commuting farther now. She missed a week. Your mom told people she was sick with nerves. Truth is, she was crying too hard to sit through class. He paused. Riley, your mother's telling the church ladies you cut your sister off because you were jealous. That almost made me laugh. Jealous? Of what? The privilege of being crushed in daylight instead of privately? What does Aubrey say? I asked. She's not defending your mom the way she used to. That mattered. When I got off the phone, I found myself staring through the clock, face at the city below. Tiny cars, tiny people, tiny dramas, all governed by time whether they respected it or not. I thought about the old house, the one my mother always described as proof of everything she had held together. I thought about the notices I used to intercept from the mailbox before Aubrey saw them. I thought about how fast the structure fell once I stopped being its hidden spring. That evening, Naomi and I stayed late testing the clean train assembly on a temporary stand. As the first corrected sequence of movement began, the gears turned with a smooth, satisfying authority I felt in my teeth. Naomi looked over at me and smiled. "There you are," she said. "What?" "That look. The one people get when they stop apologizing for what they're good at." I looked away because I felt tears threatening, and I hate crying in front of people who've been kind to me. When I got back to my room, Aubrey had left 3 voicemails. In the first, she was angry. In the second, she sounded exhausted. In the third, she sounded honest. "I found the drawer," she said. "The one Mom keeps all the statements in." She lied. "I saw your transfers. I saw how much. I don't even know what to say. She told me you never wanted me to know because you liked controlling people. But that doesn't make sense because you never used it against me. Not once." She took a shaky breath. "I think she needed me to believe you were the selfish one because if I knew the truth, I'd ask why my own mother let me thank the wrong person for 2 years. I sat on my bed in the dark and listened to that sentence again and again. A few minutes later, another text arrived from Logan. "She cries every day now, says she misses you, says she doesn't know how things got this bad." I typed back before I could soften it. "Things got this bad because she confused control with love and dependence with gratitude." Then I set the phone down and opened my project notebook. On a blank page, instead of drawing gears, I wrote a title: "The House That Ran on My Hands." Under it, I began sketching a clock with no visible spring, only an empty chamber where the hidden force should have been. Not a painting, not a dream, a mechanism of truth. Tell me honestly, if you were standing where I stood then, finally building a life, finally being respected, would you have put that piece of your pain on public display or kept it private and let the people who lied about you keep owning the story? The courthouse clock unveiling was set for the second Saturday in May, and by then the project had become bigger than I ever imagined. Reporters were coming, donors wanted speeches, and local officials were treating the restored tower like a symbol of the city getting part of itself back. For me, it meant something even deeper. For most of my life, everything valuable I did happened in secret. My work, my money, my sacrifices, none of it had a witness. This time, when the clock struck again, people would know my hands had brought it back. That morning, Naomi and I made our final inspection high inside the tower. The brass gleamed, the gears moved cleanly, and when the mechanism engaged at 11, the bell rang out over the square in a bright, powerful note that made the whole crowd cheer. Naomi laughed and slapped my shoulder. For one perfect second, I felt what it was like to stand inside a life I had actually earned. Then my phone buzzed. It was Logan. I stepped into a quiet corridor and called him back. "Aubrey's at my place," he said immediately. "She's safe, but it's bad. Your mom screamed that you're a monster and said all of this is your fault." Aubrey snapped and told her the truth, that you were the one paying. Your mom denied it. Then she called you a selfish freak who cares more about dead clocks than living people. Aubrey broke down and walked out. "She's talking about dropping the semester." I closed my eyes and leaned against the wall. Even on the biggest day of my life, my family still expected their chaos to outrank my existence. Put Aubrey on, I said. When she answered, she was crying so hard she could barely speak. I told her to stay with Logan, not go back to the duplex, and not quit school that day. Then I said the one truth she needed most. She doesn't hate losing me, Aubrey. She hates losing control of the story. After we hung up, I stood there for a moment, staring at the floor while the old instinct rose in me again. Leave everything, run home, fix it, absorb it. But I was done sacrificing every milestone just to prove I was still loyal to people who only valued my usefulness. So I went back. When they called me up to speak, I didn't mention my family. I simply said, restoration isn't about pretending damage never happened. It's about telling the truth about what failed, replacing what can't carry weight anymore, and respecting what still deserves to last. Naomi looked at me like she understood every hidden word. That night, Logan texted again. Deborah says she may need the hospital. Blood pressure's high, still blaming you. I read it once and typed back. She doesn't get to destroy me and call my boundaries cruelty. 3 days later, I drove home. Not because guilt won, and not because my mother deserved another rescue. I drove back because I knew if I stayed away any longer, they would keep rewriting my silence into guilt and my absence into blame. The decision came before sunrise. I was in the workshop reassembling a carriage clock when the local radio station mentioned the courthouse restoration and said my name on air. In one world, I was finally being recognized for skilled, careful work. In the other, I was still being painted as the selfish daughter who ruined her family. Then Logan called. Your mom's in urgent care, he said. Blood pressure spike, panic symptoms. She told the nurse this all happened because her oldest daughter abandoned her after being given everything. I looked at the half-open clock on my bench, all its moving parts exposed and honest under the lamp, and something in me went still. I wasn't going back to save them. I was going back to end the lie. Naomi walked in, took one look at my face, and said, You're leaving. I need to finish this. She nodded. Good, very different reason. So I packed my bag, my ledger, printed bank transfers, tuition records, utility payments, and one final document. A direct payment plan for Aubrey's remaining semester. If I helped again, it would go straight to the school. No more sending money into my mother's hands. No more feeding a myth that survived by erasing me. By dusk, I was back in town. The streets looked smaller. The memories didn't. I sat outside the duplex for a minute with both hands on the steering wheel while old habits tried to return. Go in soft, keep calm, apologize first. But I had not driven 3 hours to play the old role one last time. I grabbed the folder and walked to the door. Inside, I could already hear my mother shouting. If she had any decency, she'd come back and fix this. Then Aubrey's voice cut through. You mean, do it quietly so you can take credit again? I almost smiled. I opened the door and stepped in. The room went still. My mother sat wrapped in a blanket on the couch, pale and furious. Dean was in the recliner pretending not to exist. Aubrey stood near the kitchenette with her backpack still on. Logan leaned against the window. Then my mother said, So now you show up? After everything you've done? And for the first time in my life, I felt no fear at all. I closed the door behind me and set the folder on the table. No, I said. I'm here after everything you did. That shifted the room immediately. My mother stared at me, then at the papers. You think that erases what you did to this family? I pulled out the statements one by one and slid them across the table. That is 18 months of Aubrey's tuition. That is the heating bill. That is the plumbing repair. That is the overdue electric notice. That is the mortgage payment I covered last August while you told people I never gave this family anything. Aubrey grabbed the pages before my mother could. Her face changed as she read. Not shock anymore. Recognition, scale, pattern. Mom, she said, voice breaking, you let me thank you for this. My mother's lips trembled. I was protecting the family. No, I said. You were protecting your image. She stood too fast and had to grab the table. I held this family together. I laughed once, quietly. No, I did. You just took credit for it. That landed harder than shouting ever could. Aubrey sat down heavily, still clutching the statements. She was paying everything, wasn't she? Nobody answered, because nobody could. Then my mother collapsed back into the chair like something inside her had finally broken. I didn't know how to admit we needed you, she whispered. Once people see you failing, they never forget it. I stepped closer. So you made me carry the failure and called it love. Her face crumpled. A second later, to everyone's shock, she slid down onto her knees beside the table. It wasn't graceful or dramatic, just ugly and real. I was wrong, she said, crying now. I was wrong about you. Wrong about what you gave. Wrong to make Aubrey believe you were selfish. I lost the house because of my own pride, not because you left. Then she said the words I had waited years to hear. I'm sorry. Dean muttered his own apology from the recliner, but I barely looked at him. My focus was Aubrey. I handed her the final paper. Here's what happens next. If you still want to finish school, I'll pay 1 semester directly to the bursar. Directly. Not through Mom, not through anyone else. After that, we make a real plan. Budget, work, scholarships. I will help you. But I will never be this family's invisible bank again. Aubrey nodded through tears. Then I looked at my mother. And if you want any relationship with me, there are conditions. You stop lying about me. To family, to friends, to anyone. You tell the truth, that I carried this family financially for years and left because I was treated like nothing. You do not insult my work again. And you do not use Aubrey to punish me. She nodded immediately. I'll do it. No, I said. You'll prove it. So that night, standing in that shabby duplex with Logan holding up a phone, my mother recorded a video apology for the relatives and churchwomen she had lied to. Voice shaking, face blotched with tears, she admitted the truth. I had supported the family, and she had lied because she was too proud to admit it. A week later, she did it again publicly under a newspaper post about the courthouse clock restoration. Under my photo where strangers were praising my work, she wrote, I was wrong about my daughter. She gave this family more than we ever admitted, and I hurt her because I was too proud to say we depended on her. I'm sorry, Riley. That comment didn't heal everything, but it killed the lie in public, and that mattered. Aubrey stayed with Logan and finished the semester with direct help from me. Dean picked up extra work. My mother started counseling. I never moved back, never resumed the old role, and never again apologized for having a life outside their emergencies. The biggest lesson I learned was this. Family love turns poisonous the moment it demands your self-respect as payment. Leaving didn't destroy my family. It destroyed the lie that they could survive without me while convincing me I was worth nothing. The day I walked out, I didn't become cruel. I became visible. And that was the one thing they could no longer survive without facing.